How close should AI get to us? I mean, how close is close enough? Misinformation and disinformation, manipulated information.
Nowadays, the problem with AI is it's getting so sophisticated
Yes.
that it's just getting harder and harder to tell what is real and what is not.
Synthetic content, deepfake videos, voice cloning.
These tools are being created mostly in developed countries. That means a specific culture.
It's even implied bias for
Exactly. So,
Western thinking.
are we going to get to the point where we just prefer to be with, an AI companion rather than a human?
Where is the human element and the human emotion compared to the mechanic emotion?
The more the AI companion resembles human,
Yeah.
the higher the risk.
The red thread is self-reliance, self-responsibility, critical review of what is shown to you, and really get back to the roots as to where we come from.
Hi everyone, welcome to Sci-Tech Suisse. My name is Margarita Silva and I'm here with Peter Model. We are the producers of this podcast. And today we have a new episode of a new format that we have that we recently launched. It's called Vibe Check. And this is a debate format where we are going to discuss some topics related to AI and technology. So today we actually have a very special topic, which is AI and ethics, very broad. That's why we have simplified it to three specific topics.
Excellent. Yes. Now, very important because particularly with generative AI, the discussion of ethics comes up in various themes. And we will cover three areas today. One is AI and the fake news, so lies and what can be done with AI. Yeah. The second one is the bias, which is one that's very broadly discussed. And then one that's a little bit warmer and fuzzy, which is AI and relationship building, which is a big topic called emotional AI, so to speak. Okay. And to start off with, we thought, let's look in the Oxford Dictionary to find out what ethics stands for, right? We all know, philosophically, humanistically trained, what ethic could stand for. And the definition is really, ethic is a set of moral principles, especially ones relating to or affirming a specified group, field, or form of conduct. So very important, even though ethic is a philosophical term, it's not absolute. Typically, philosophical terms, values are absolute. This one is relative to certain groups. And we'll talk about that when we come to bias, because we can't really put a whole umbrella of one ethical thinking around the globe. Different groups, different people, different countries, different religions define ethics differently. So this is what we start with. The first topic we want to discuss is AI and fake news. A 2024 Global Risk Report, where all the participants and the major thinkers in the world are participating in what is on their mind, what should they be worried about the next 2 to 10 years. And interesting enough, for the first time in 2024, it was not climate change, it was not the economic development, it was not the wars going on all over the places, but it was misinformation and disinformation. It was manipulated information, and where AI plays a very vital role. So the first time, the consensus was that those are areas that we have to look out for. The dangers that the World Economic Forum defines in its report was a threat to democracy, although it would be interesting to also discuss if even dictatorships can be threatened by that. But for now, they looked at democracy, civil unrest, distrust in media, faster polarized views, this instant gratification, this headline thinking confirmed by that. And the major danger that was defined by this report was called the synthetic content, right? So in the good old days, the journalist went to the site, wrote it up, delivered it to the office. Now it's synthetic content. that covers deepfake videos, that covers voice cloning and quantified websites. So this is sort of the framework as to where we are acting in this field. And there are very specific examples, right? Like you found one in Venezuela.
Yes, so, well, there are several things to discuss here. So the first thing I would like to say is that we have been talking about fake news for a while now, as you said.
Yes.
But then the AI has been increasing this risk because the tools have become more and more accurate, right?
Yes.
It's easier today to fake a video than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes.
And same with images, like, because before we had Photoshop, right? And we could fake a photo. But then it was
embellished, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was a bit easier to tell if it was fake.
Yes.
Nowadays, the problem with AI is it's getting so sophisticated that it's just getting harder and harder to tell what is real and what is not.
Yes.
And one thing I found that it's interesting is that one of the problems this poses is that truth can be debated. That means, because now we don't know, we have an image and we can say, oh, but this is AI, but it might actually be true. Yes. Like, for example, and that's what's happening in some trials. There are some proofs that have been presented and people, their defense is, no, but that's created by AI.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell, is it created by AI or is it actually true? So one of the main problems we're having right now is it's been getting harder and harder to tell what is real and what is not. So
absolutely. And of course, given all the social media and the social networks, all these things are shared by the second on the major networks of social media.
And the thing with
that makes it dangerous.
What you said about the democracy, it's because more and more lies have been spread in the last few years during the election periods.
Yeah.
So it is a big deal. You also mentioned the dictatorships, like in Venezuela, for example. Yeah. And one of the things that the studies have found is that it's easier for governments right now with the help of AI to influence, but also to censor and to control what people are using. And this has been used in China, this has been used in Iran, and Russia, exactly, Venezuela as well. So that means that the freedom in internet is being decreased every day because of AI, because the governments are using AI to select what people can see. Algorithms will decide what to show you.
Yes.
Right? So AI will decide if the government is manipulating the algorithm, that will decide, oh, this video is talking badly about the government. Let's not show it to everyone.
And it's very frustrating because how do you control that? I mean, it's coming back to the Saucer's Apprentice, that old poem that's 200 years old, where while the saucer is gone for lunch, his apprentice is engaging the brooms to clean the house, and it just overcomes him. One of the relationship that ethic and moral have is the law. So the basis or the outcome of a group of people that says ethically we find this right or wrong, morally we find this right or wrong, the outcome is laws. The problem is, as we discussed before, ethics is not a global term. If you are in a dictatorship, there's a different set of ethics, and therefore the government or any kind of body is willing to curtail their manipulative possibilities or the way to spread the news, or even interfere with others' countries' elections, right? Mm-hmm. So very, very complex. The European Union sort of tries to come by with it with laws. Yeah. Within Europe, that may be possible. Many of those providers are sitting somewhere in Africa, somewhere on an island that is not part of the European jurisdiction. So it's going to be a heyday for lawyers.
Yes, but I think the main problem with all of this is, and there was a letter that was signed last year by many entrepreneurs and famous people saying AI is developing too fast. We need to slow it down. Yeah. And the problem right now is precisely that. It's advancing so much and then the laws are not. Yeah. And we had the same problem with internet at the very first, like the first few years. Yeah. No laws, no control. People started, using internet to scam, to
leave their footprint.
Exactly.
Right? Their MasterCard number, their address, their name, their
And we
birthday.
had no laws for that. And then we have been creating the laws very recently, but then, it was already too late. Yes. And now with AI, the problem is it develops even 10 times or 100 times faster than the development we had with internet.
Yeah.
So when are the laws are going to come? Because some countries are starting to work on this.
Yeah.
And as you said, the World Economic Forum or this kind of big organizations are discussing it.
Yes.
But not in the speed it should be happening, because AI is just going and going and going.
And going faster, and there are different groups out there. The majority, of course, are not malintended, but some can use it as a malintention. So at the end of the day, it's basically self-control. It's critical review of what you're reading, balancing it out. Don't have that instant gratification headline thinking only. So really to slow down and become more critical. Very, very difficult, but it's part of the truth.
There is also the challenge from journalists, because we have been doing fact checking in the last few years.
Yes.
But now fact checking is getting harder and harder because of all of this. So journalists, first of all, we need to really improve ourselves on learning how to tell and using the tools, the right tools, how to tell when an image is real, when it's not. Like the big agencies are doing this already. Like for example, when we had the case of the Crown in UK, when there was this image that William and Kate presented of themselves, and then there was an agency that said, no, but this is manipulated. This is not a real picture.
Real picture.
Exactly. So they had to explain themselves.
They
were not expecting that. But then the good thing is, like, it's happening. The big agencies, at least, that have the money to do it, they are doing it.
Yes.
But the other thing we need to go into in the law spectrum is the copywriting. Because one of the main problems all of these poses is that you can use the voice of anyone you want, or the face of anyone you want, to do whatever you want. And on the other side, dignity. Because you can find yourself in a video just, circulating. It could be anything. It could be an erotic video. It could be, it could be against it was already happening before, as I said, but now it's becoming more and more real. So people will see this video and Peter.
Yes.
But you know what? It's going to be hard to tell. You will say, no, but that's not me. That's AI created. I don't know. It looks very real to me. So...
so it's going to be a huge challenge. You could think about self-regulatory groups. Certainly platforms like the World Economic Forum is the right platform that gives an unbiased review of the whole thing. Maybe you could also argue World Economic Forum is too Western tilted, doesn't include other parts. But it's going to be a challenge, and I think at the end of the day, each individual person has to make a judgment for his and herself. How to read the news, and as long as we have good agencies like Agence France Presse, German American agencies that sort of filter that. Even YouTube is very strictly in their policy what you do on the YouTube videos, what wording you use, and what technology you use. So as long as we have these self-responsible agencies and companies doing that, we should be in good hands. But it's basically watch out. That's the message, so to speak.
Yes, and the last thing would be education. We need education to be focused on teaching kids who are, growing up with all of this.
Yes. To
use it properly and to distinct what is real and what is not.
Absolutely, and that's a topic we'll cover in one of the next vibe checks, because the relationship of teachers and or education and AI you covered in the last video, and it's definitely something we're going to continue to observe very carefully. The other topic, as I mentioned before, is AI and the bias. We sort of looked at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, that interviewed about 100 developers, including Toshiba, Microsoft, and Intel, what those biases are. They define for us 5 different types of biases. One is called the impliant bias, and that goes back to ethics being for certain groups, where there's a consensus of certain groups on that. That's sort of an embedded, deeply embedded, educated, living in a certain homogeneous environment that automatically excludes other factors. A good example is Amazon a couple of years ago wanted to ease the hiring process and gave in the algorithm certain things they're looking for. And they realized afterwards that they forgot to include women because they thought engineers could only be men. And all of a sudden, they kick out all the women in the interviewing process. Remedy took care of it and whatnot. So implied bias is something that's very, very embedded, as I said before, and one to watch out for. The other one they noticed is the sampling bias. Well, that's that we had forever, which is garbage in, garbage out. In other words, if the sample you're using in order to come up with a solution, then the quality of the outcome is dependent on the quality of the input, basically. Then you have a temporal bias, which in the old days, meaning in 2000 you developed that, in 2024 all the parameters might have shifted. That in the old days was on a generational basis. Now it's on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly basis. So temporal bias, meaning it's important today, but maybe next week it's not important at all, is one that was defined. Then there was two technical ones, overfitting by training data. That sounds very technical, but basically what that means is you rely on historic data. And in the capital markets, many, many years ago, you already said, if you look in the rear view mirror, chances are you hit a tree, right? So if you don't look in the future, you don't have Monte Carlo analysis on what if scenarios and whatnot, only rely your data and algorithm on what happened yesterday or 2 seconds ago. This data is old and it's not necessarily a way to confirm what will be the future, okay? And the other one is called the edge cases and outliers. Well, that has been defined by Nassim Taleb, a professor from NYU, as the black swan theory, right? So we all know the Gauss curve, saying that standard deviation in a certain sample outcomes can be predicted. It's used in medicine, it's used in statistics and technology and building houses and building airplanes and whatnot. 99.9%, this is the outcome to be expected. What Nassim did 20 years ago, he said, well, but there could be the black swan. In other words, the swan that never turns white, called the outlier. And we've seen in 2008, the Lehman Brothers catastrophe couldn't be predicted. We see it in tsunami predictions, doing a lousy job. The outlier is sometimes the expected outcome, so to speak. So those were the 5 biases that they defined. And we'll talk about the remedies thereafter, but just off the bat, what are your observations on the bias in the various parts?
Yes, well, I think one of the most obvious ones that we can actually easily tell in tools like ChatGPT, for example.
Good example.
It's the Western view, because these tools are being created mostly in developed countries,
yes,
right? And that means a specific culture. That means a specific ideology.
It's even implied bias for Western thinking.
So what's happening is, because all these AI tools have been built by these kind of people, then they are not very close to the views of the developing countries, right? So the thing is, like, that poses a bias, because the answers that you will get from there are going to be
tilted towards that.
So that poses a problem, especially because AI is costly. Like produce or like the technical part of creating AI, it costs money.
Yes.
That means that the countries that have more money are gonna use AI more and develop it more. That means most of the tools that we are gonna be using are not going to be made in these developing countries.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in one of our next vibe checks, we'll talk about who are the nations that are leading in developing the new AI. And it ain't Europe. Europe is far behind that curve. Leading are the United States still, and of course, China. So we have 2 very, very big pools and poles out there who are spending a lot of money in developing the AI, and unfortunately we in Europe are way behind the curve. We have too much internal problems, migration, other issues that slow down an economy and whatnot. So it's not only that the developing or the developed countries will give the tone, it's really China and America at the moment that drive with that. And even we Europeans or Latin Americans or Africans or Australians are way behind the curve, totally relying on the development, on the patents of AI in those two centers. And guess who is growing faster?
And also what you were mentioning, like the historical bias, for example, that also has a big influence in this kind of tools that we're using, like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because, and this is something that we've been discussing a lot in Latin America for many years, like when you read the history about how Columbus came to America, blah, 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 normally that is told by Spanish people. And that tells one side of the story. Right? It tells the story that they came and they provide a culture to people and knowledge and all this stuff, but they're not telling the side that people were killed, people were raped, this kind of thing. And that is the problem with history. Sometimes can be told just from one side. And then the problem is these AI tools are using whatever it's
the historical data.
The historical data that is provided to them exactly is specific on one side of the story, or it has one side of studies in general. So that poses also a problem because they work with the information they are given.
Exactly, but also what you indirectly say is that we don't have that problem of historical data since AI, right? If you check the historical books that you had in your high school in Colombia or I in Austria. Particularly me in Austria, totally different from the Germans, right? Well, we were saying, just to use World War II as an example, we were taken over by the Germans, right? Mm-hmm. Germany made it very clear, no, you were all part of the same thing. So the bias in historical data is one that we use every day, by the way, in valuation models, because it is the most reliable. We use it in the capital markets, we use it in real estate, and what have you, in education. But it has that bias in there, either run by the government or by that thinking of that group that at the moment is in charge. So it's a moving target. But as you said, AI uncritically takes over what's there, unfiltered, so to speak. So another example of that, Black Swan. We already had the example that sometimes the totally unexpected outlier, that 0.1% chance on the outliers of the Gaussian curve all of a sudden becomes the center, is another one. And the NIST recommended some remedies against that. One very logical is to come up with inclusive models, if you can, and to have foreseeability. I mean, statistically, we do have tools. We had tools for many, many decades on how to predict the future. Weather reports is a good example. The stock exchange, currencies, and what. So we're using it on a daily basis. When you build bridges, you have to foresee all kind of storms, tsunamis, and earthquakes and whatnot. So we do have those tools. But as you said, it's a business, right? So if you can avoid that and just rely on historical, that's cheaper than now having to hire a whole group that says what could happen with that information in the next 20, 30 years. But we should definitely do that.
Even though AI is doing it now as well. You can ask AI. And it's funny because many media outlets are using AI to say, like, I don't know, there is a football match and they ask AI,
who's going to win?
Yes, who's going to win today? Yes. And then they make, a report on that. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem very ethical from the reporters, but it's being used for those kind of things as well. Obviously, it's not going to be always accurate, but sometimes it is, especially if it uses like the statistics of the players that are in the game or this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Might be closer to reality than you think. But the other thing I was going to add to the solutions that you were saying is that the World Economic Forum suggests that also we need more people specialized on AI analytics. So it means people only focused on all of these matters that we're speaking.
Yeah.
To be involved in all projects. So, okay, you're gonna create a software or an AI program, right? You need to have a person specifically dedicated to this matter of the ethical questions, the ethical issues, and being able to, because there are always trials of this before it's actually on the market.
Right.
So that means they need to involve all kinds of people in the trials. So all races, all religions, all politic views. So in order to, keep it balanced, they can do this kind of.
It's a very interesting observation, because if you look at the corporate world, about 20, 30 years ago, you didn't have a chief information officer. You didn't have a chief administrative officer for all the internet and whatnot. But of course, the smart corporations in the world had to do that in order to increase efficiency of their own processes, develop their own software. And very similar, I would predict, or I would not exclude, that there is a chief ethic officer or a chief EAI officer, emotional artificial intelligence, or a chief AI officer for that matter, where on a corporate level, you have to define for yourself what you're doing. But also on a government level, as we develop, for instance, we have a secretary of buildings, a secretary of environment. Why not have a secretary of technology in the future, where the smart governments on a democratic basis see, well, we need independent advice on that. We need somebody focusing just on developments on that. You just mentioned the increase of velocity, the speed and whatnot. So I think this could be a very viable part in that development that has both controlling but also encouraging development. Not just control in the sense of forbidding, but controlling in the sense of developing new ones. So interesting aspect, which is a positive note, if you will.
Yes.
Well, let's cover the third part, which is a little bit more on the soft side, and it's called emotional AI and we. Okay, so how close should AI get to us? I mean, how close is close enough? Where is the human element and the human emotion compared to the mechanic emotion? And this is a topic that is in the press all over. It really kicked off during Corona, when people were in isolation, and a very smart lady out of Berkeley in San Francisco developed an application called Replica, in a very good meaning sense, to say, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a companion, male companion, female companion, whatever it is. And Replica was developed by her out in California. She had about 500,000 subscribers very quickly, where you create your companion based on your data, on like she should be blonde, she should be tall, she should be a good cook, whatever it is. And of course, being AI and generative AI, it was self-learning. So it could pick up, oh, Peter's in a bad mood. Oh, Peter, are you sad now? Are you happy now? So it's re-encouraging and comforting my mood levels and whatnot. And needless to say, it has over 10 million subscribers now. Is a lot. It's compared to 9 billion people, not threatening, but it's a development. And similar applications were done for creating my dog, creating my cat, creating my monkey. So for animals, you have that. And the ethical question, the philosophical question that was asked by the university in Bochum by Dr. Weber Guschank in 2021 is, how close is close enough? What are your observations on that?
You know, when I went into the website of this Replica app, it really caught my attention, because it says it will remember the special moments and special dates for you.
Okay. And
it caught my attention because I think one of the main problems that couples have is, you forgot our anniversary, you forgot my birthday. You know, today is my mother's birthday, how can you forget? And then when you see this, it poses many problems. The first of them is, are we going to get to the point where we just prefer to be with, you know, an AI companion rather than a human, because it's just going to be easier. It's going to adapt to your needs.
No fights.
No fights. It's going to adapt to your needs quite easily, right? So that's the first problem. And the second one that got me thinking is, what would happen if your partner is using this app and getting close to it and closer and telling this app things that they are not telling to you?
So where he or she manipulates the app, or what?
Yes, like for example, let's say your wife has this app.
Yeah.
And then
with her companion.
With the Replica thing.
Yeah.
And then she's using this app a lot and talking to them and telling them, you know what, I really appreciate your companionship, your advice, and telling them about your relationship, for example.
Yeah.
Or, telling very close things that maybe she's not telling you.
Yeah.
Would you feel jealous at some point? like, I don't know.
So almost like the technology becomes my
yes, it might feel like infidelity at some point, right? Okay. Like, I don't know. I mean, I just leave it there, but it's something that might happen at some point.
Well, that's a very important part, because one of the findings that she had was self-deception. In other words, it's very hard at one point to separate from, wait a minute, that's a machine, to, oh my gosh, am I cheating on my partner? So that self-deception, that all of a sudden that perfect little machine is what it is something that you have to be mindful of. Interesting enough, she didn't find any argument against it, but she was struggling to find something for it. So in other words, she sort of, amongst the critical colleagues, they came to the conclusion, well, we can't really, I mean, if this is a companion and it's helping you, and instead of committing suicide or instead of drinking a bottle of gin or become an alcoholic or a drug addict, if that little machine is your psychology on hire, your buddy on hire, if that sort of makes you a better person, how can we be against it? The flip side, of course, is, and that is that huge word self-deception, is that you sort of emerge or merge with your artificial intelligence thing, like some men with their cars.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. But my conclusion, because there were several examples used in this article, and some examples were towards, okay, we do have feelings for objects. Yeah. That is true. Yeah. We have like cars. Certain objects, yes, exactly. So men, for example, with the cars, or women. But then my personal intake in this is that the more the AI companion resembles human, the higher the risk. Because with objects, they are objects. Yes. Even if you have feelings for them, you're not expecting them to talk to you or to give you a hug. Yes. Because they're inanimate. Yeah. Right? So that's one thing. With animals, which are a bit in between humans and objects, it's a bit the same. You're not expecting the animal to be aware because they don't have a conscience. Yeah. So you are expecting them to show you some affection, but they're not going to be conscious of saying, oh, this margarita is like this. Like, there are certain limitations, so we are aware of that. Yeah. So if I have a little robot that resembles a dog or whatever, like that, you still have that mindset because it's an animal, kind of. But then when it comes to the human, you are expecting from the other human to be aware of your existence, right? Of have some level of consciousness and to choose to love you. Yes. Which is a difference with animals. Like, animals don't really, it's more like an instinct. You protect them, you give them food, etc. So they love you as an instinct. Yeah. But with humans, they choose to love you. Yeah. So my issue with this is like, if you have a robot or an AI that is resembling a human, your automatic assumption is they are choosing to love you, right? But it's not true. Because there's nothing behind, right? It's just based on based on algorithms. And the good so that's the deception part, right? Exactly, and the good example of it is the Ex Machina movie, which is amazing because the whole point of the movie is actually that the main character is interacting with this robot, and the whole point is, can the robot convince this person that she's a human? Yes. And in the end, he falls in love with her. He believes in her. And they're going to escape together, and she betrays him. And he spoiler alert. I was going to say, anybody who wanted to see the movie. It's it's an old movie now. So if you haven't watched it, this is the point to stop and go and watch it and come back. But spoiler alert. Yeah. She betrays him and he dies. Yes. And it's because she never cared about him. She was just resembling his emotions, or copying the emotion just to seem that she was into him and she was loving him, but her only objective was just to be free. Yes. As soon as she was free, she wouldn't care about him. Yeah. And that is the reality. That's it. So I think if we summarize what we discussed today, the red thread is self-reliance, self-responsibility, critical review of what is shown to you, be that best friend, a chatbot, or information in newspaper, and really get back to the roots as to where we come from. For instance, I was brought up in the countryside in Austria, where for me the farmers were the benchmark, right?
Pharma is very, very sensitive to weather changes because that influences the yield. Farmers are very, very sensitive to viruses with animals because that, again, is affecting the yield. So those natural instincts that we still have and how dependent we are from extraterrestrial things, or in this case, the technology that we self-created, right? It wasn't forced to us by the tigers and lions and elephants and the Mars people out there. No, we were the ones, very proudly as technology-driven people, to develop that, and it helps us in a lot of part. I mean, it is a very good assistant, and ChatGPT is a fantastic tool that we use every day. But it requires responsibility, self-reliance, and self-control. So the individual is even more important than the government control and what have you. As we discussed, corporations should develop that role of a chief AI officer. Governments should have Secretary of AI, Secretary of Technology, because only then can we have an objective, broadening approach, but one that we will certainly follow closely.
Yes, well, definitely. Especially because one of the main issues regarding to what you just said is that companies can use this in their advantage.
On the buy side, sure.
Exactly, because what they're going to start doing, or they're already doing, is using these AI tools to get closer to you, to get closer to your emotions, and then convince you of buying things, of doing some certain things. There is a level of manipulation there.
Absolutely, but that has been around for a long time,
yes,
as we said before. Yes. Footprints
just
we've left
just getting fancier
forever. It's fancier and trickier, but it really is down to self-reliance and grows from there. I'd like to thank you very much for listening. Do subscribe if you like it, and join our close to 1 million followers on YouTube and other channels on the social media. I'd like to thank you very much, and it was a pleasure being here. It was fun.
Yes, it was a pleasure, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.